Hey there, welcome back to the Steel City Sports Podcast, and today we are going to be ranking all 32 starting quarterbacks going into next season. So this is a bit of a blend of what they did last year combined with what I think they're going to be going into next season. So this is definitely going to be a long-form podcast version. I've been uploading a lot of shorts lately. That just tends to do better in the YouTube algorithm, but I really do prefer these long-form discussions where I can really flesh out my thoughts. You know, the shorts, you only have a minute, and, you know, someone like me who can ramble about this stuff for hours, it's really hard for me to condense into a minute. So I do prefer these type of videos. They don't get the type of views that the shorts do, but let's rank these quarterbacks here. Starting off our list at 32, we have Anthony Richardson. Now, I did break this list down into 4 different categories, and this first category is the unproven section. So Anthony Richardson coming in as obviously a rookie, but he has all the potential in the world. You know, for me, he's a big boom-bust guy. He didn't have a lot of weapons at Florida and still was really spectacular, so I think if he's in the right situation, which the Colts could be. You know, I do like a lot of things about the Colts. I think their O-line, you know, was definitely banged up last year, but they do have a good O-line when healthy. Jonathan Taylor, still one of the best running backs in the entire NFL. I don't love their receiving core here in Indy, but like I said, he didn't have a great surrounding cast in Florida and was still able to be really good. So I like Anthony Richardson, but he's definitely a project. It's definitely going to take a while. He's not just going to walk into the league instantly and be good. So extremely unproven, very raw type of prospect player. Has a lot of potential, but for now, he is at last place. Sticking in our unproven category at 31, we have Sam Howell. So we only saw him play in one game last year, and he wasn't particularly impressive in that. Only had 169 passing yards and had a 58 completion percentage. So there's just not very much out there on Sam Howell. That's why I think I have him down here. There's definitely something there with Howell. I think you take him over Wentz just at this point. I think the potential of Sam Howell is more valuable than the recklessness you have in Carson Wentz. So it's definitely worth it to see what you have and give him the start this year. But like I said, there's just so little on him that I can't put him much higher on this list. And at number 30, we have Jordan Love. So unlike Sam Howell, Jordan Love was actually a first-round pick, so I do think he has higher upside than Sam Howell. I think he's in a better situation with Green Bay. But in terms of his play, similar to Sam Howell, we've just seen so little. You know, he's been the backup to Aaron Rodgers ever since he's been in the league. And last year, he only had one start. Didn't really wow me in any way. You know, he was efficient, I guess. You know, had a little under 200 yards, but I didn't really see any wow factor there, especially for a guy who's, been on the bench for so long. You think he'd be ready to kind of come in. So, obviously, Green Bay is all in on Jordan Love. This is basically his make-or-break year. So they have a lot riding on him this year. It's just, again, I haven't seen enough to really confidently put him any higher on the list, so he stays here at 30. Coming in at 29, we have Desmond Ridder. I liked him a lot in college at Cincinnati. Similar to the other guys, we haven't seen much. You know, I'm kind of sounding like a broken record, but that really is the thing. I can't divulge too much into them. Desmond Ridder did start 4 games last season and was pretty stable. I think he can grow into a nice game manager type of quarterback. And the thing that I like about Desmond Ridder, or his situation over Jordan Love or Sam Howell, is he has a really nice weapons core around him. You know, Drake London was really good last year. He was one of the best rookies. You have Kyle Pitts, who was a top 5 pick not long ago. You have B. John Robinson, who was, the highest rated running back. Some even had him as the best player in the draft this year. So he has a really nice supporting cast around him. I still think Arthur Smith has, there's something there with Arthur Smith at head coach. So I like the situation he's in. I like what he could be, but as of right now, I just haven't seen enough, so he is down here towards the bottom. Next up at 28, we have CJ Stroud, and CJ was definitely one of the hardest players to rank on this list because not only is he a rookie, but he's coming from Ohio State, and it seems like Ohio State has really received a lot of backlash in terms of the fact that their quarterbacks just don't really produce in the NFL. Now, I'm still holding out for Justin Fields. I think there's something there, as we'll talk about a little later on here. But a big part of the reason why C.J. Stroud was kind of in that rumor to be the first overall pick over Bryce Young is because he's much more NFL ready He made very little mistakes at Ohio State. Obviously it's easier to make little mistakes there whenever you're throwing to, Marvin Harrison and the great receiving core they have there. But I think he can be really efficient in the NFL. He does remind me of like that Jared Goff, very high floor, but not maybe the highest ceiling in the world. So he's going to obviously a pretty bad organization in Houston, so that worries me. But he gives me very good vibes in terms of like he seems mature, he's grown up, and I think he's going to do what's right for the team. So definitely one of the players I'm very interested in watching next year. He's here. Coming in at 27, we have Sam Darnold. Now, Sam Darnold, I have to say, he's definitely in the conversation for one of the biggest busts of the past decade, just given what he was looked at coming into the NFL. However, I'll defend him a little. He went to basically a clown show with the Jets. They were very poorly run whenever he was there. Whenever he got to Carolina, he dealt with a lot of injuries. McCaffrey was injured a lot. I will point out there was a big bright spot in his career at the start of the 2021 season. Whenever he was the starter in Carolina, they did start off 4-0. They looked like a pretty good team, but then it went downhill pretty quick with all the injuries, obviously to Darnold and McCaffrey. Just kind of became a mess, There's definitely issues with Darnold's game, but you can't tell me he's not talented, There's something there with him. It's just he tends to have sort of that Carson Wentz in him where he just wants to take over games and play hero ball, and he tends to make some really bad decisions. But he's in a really good situation now with San Francisco. I think probably the best situation for a quarterback in the entire NFL, just given the Niners line, the weapons they have with McCaffrey and Kittle and Debo and Brandon Ayuk. There's just so much positive in San Francisco. So he has potential to maybe, be an effective player this year. So I'm definitely interested to see what he does. And for the last player in our unproven category, at number 26, we have Bryce Young, this year's number 1 overall pick in the draft. I think Bryce Young is going to be really good in the NFL. Now, I don't think he'll ever quite reach superstardom, but I think he's a guy that you can build around. He's going to a pretty stable organization at this time. I know that they've had a lot of troubles in the past, but I really liked their offseason. I thought that they made some really good moves. They brought in a weapon for Bryce Young to throw to in Adam Thielen. They bolstered up their run game, and they brought in a legitimate head coach in Frank Reich. So there's a lot to like with Bryce Young. Obviously, he was the number 1 pick for a reason. At Alabama, he was a superstar in college. There's a reason why you go number 1 overall. And he looked incredible at Alabama. There was very little holes in his game. I know he's a little smaller, and that was a reason why a lot of people were hesitant on him going number 1 overall. But I don't think you can really knock quarterbacks for size anymore. I know you'd prefer to have bigger quarterbacks, but we've seen smaller quarterbacks have a ton of success in this league. Russell Wilson in his prime, Drew Brees is a great example, and Drew Brees actually was his comp. So if he reaches that, he's going to be incredible. I think he has really high upside. Maybe not you could argue Anthony Richardson probably has higher potential, but I think Bryce Young, he's just better at this point. He's more polished, and I think he can be really good. So let's move on to our next category. So at 25, we have Mac Jones, the first player in our next category. And this category is essentially, you can win games with these guys. Some of these guys have proven that you can definitely win games with them, and you just need a lot around them at this point in their careers. With Mac Jones specifically, I think he's very much a game manager. I think a good comparison for him is Jimmy Garoppolo, really. Maybe his ceiling's a bit higher than Jimmy Garoppolo. He really had a great rookie season, but it really just, I think it's one of the biggest cases of coaching matters because his rookie year, he had Josh McDaniel as his offensive coordinator, who is a great coordinator. I don't know if he's a great head coach. He's kind of a disaster last year with the Raiders. We won't get into that now. But now this past year, they had Matt Patricia, a defensive guy, calling the plays. And you see that it suffered. His game suffered a lot because you had a guy who didn't know what he was doing calling the plays. Now you bring in an actual offensive coordinator with Bill O'Brien, bringing him back to New England. I like Bill O'Brien as a play caller. I hate him as like a GM or head coach type of role, but I think he's proven he's a really good coordinator. So Mac Jones, I think he has the potential to look a lot better this year. Obviously would have looked a lot better if Hopkins would have signed with the Patriots, but he's a game manager. He's not going to make a crazy throw like a Carson Wentz would. He's pretty efficient. Does lack in that athletic athletic department, but whenever he's on, he's extremely accurate, and he's proven he can win games. He led them to the playoffs his rookie year. So I still like Mac, but he definitely fell off last year. Coming in at 24, we have Baker Mayfield, a former number 1 overall pick. Baker is such a mixed bag. I think he's one of the hardest players in the league to really rank because Baker's upside is really, really good. But the problem is it just doesn't come out a lot. There's a lot of recklessness in between the really high upside Baker. But you can't tell me that Baker Mayfield is not a productive NFL player. As a rookie with the disaster Cleveland Browns, shattered Peyton Manning's touchdown record. Obviously, it was later broken by Herbert, but that's a pretty big accomplishment. He led the Browns to their first playoff win in 20-something years over my Steelers. I vividly remember that game. He didn't do a whole lot in that game, but he was good and was really good even against the Chiefs that next round. They were within a touchdown of beating the Chiefs, who went on to go to the Super Bowl that year. So like I said, it's really hard for me to rank Baker because I liked Baker a lot when he was with the Browns, even though I'm a Steelers fan. I just liked Baker individually, so I will admit I'm probably more biased on him than other people are. I still think that there's something there, but he's proven if you put the pieces around him, he can be extremely productive, and like I said, he's won a playoff game. So there's something there with Baker, and I do like a lot about Tampa. I still think their defense is really good. They still have a great receiving core, but we'll see what happens. Coming in at 23, we have Daniel Jones. Now, this might be a controversial placement for Daniel Jones. Some people might put him a lot higher than me, but I honestly think that the contract Daniel Jones was given will age as one of the worst contracts given out in recent memory. To me, it makes absolutely zero sense why Daniel Jones is making $40 million per year. Daniel Jones, at best, is just a more athletic version of a Jimmy G, and he still hasn't even hit Jimmy. I don't think he's even as good as Jimmy G right now, but I do give him points for his athleticism, his ability to get out of the pocket and extend plays. I like that. That's probably the best thing he has going for him, but in terms of his actual production on the field, not the most efficient player. He had a pretty nice season under one of the top 5 best offensive minds in the league, Brian Dable. And the fact that New York gave him that much money, to me, is absolutely mind-blowing. And the fact that they tagged Saquon, now that Saquon's basically done with the Giants, even if he plays this year, he's probably not going to play beyond that. And to me, Saquon was much more an integral part of their offense this past season. So I like Daniel Jones. I think the contract is absolutely outrageous for him. So that's one you guys are going to have to let me know. I made a short earlier this week about the Giants, and I had some Giants fans that were kind of mad at me. So we'll see what they have to say about my Daniel Jones take. Coming in at 22, we have Justin Fields. He might be a bit of an outlier in this category because the category is they can win if they have the right pieces around them. We haven't seen that with Justin Fields yet. However, I think this is the year we're going to see that happen. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty around him. I think he's one of the most fascinating players in the league because if he works out, he's going to be a star, a stud. But I just haven't seen enough, obviously, with his passing ability. Like I said, that should be much more improved now that he has a real stable receiver in DJ Moore. Mooney's going to be back off of injury. Claypool's a pretty good 3. I know a lot about him being a Steelers fan. They have a nice tight end core. Their O-line's getting better. So there's stuff around Fields. I think this is really the make or break year for Justin Fields. The thing that gets him higher up on the list than people like Daniel Jones or people like Baker Mayfield is he does have that one it factor. There's that one thing that he actually does very, very good on the field, and that's obviously his running ability. Definitely one of the most athletic players at the position, had over 1,000 rushing yards at the quarterback position. And for me, if you have an it factor at something on the field, that's valuable enough to stay as a long-term starter. If he just gets his passing game up to more efficient and more stable, like I said, he's going to be a really big deal, especially being in Chicago, who hasn't had an elite quarterback really in their franchise. I'm rooting for him. I'm definitely interested to see what he does this year. Coming in at 21, we have Jimmy Garoppolo. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why the San Francisco 49ers were in such a hurry to get Jimmy G out the door. Because I think he's literally the perfect player for that offense. They got to a Super Bowl with him. They got to 2 other NFC championship games with Jimmy Garoppolo. All the guy did was lead them to deep playoff runs. A lot of wins with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, all that being said, he definitely has his limitations. He's not going to make any wow plays. He's not, he has kind of a weaker arm, and he definitely has his injury concerns, but I think he's a very stable quarterback. I don't know exactly what he's going to do with the Raiders. I think the Raiders are I don't even know what to think about them at this point in time because I like a lot of the stuff they have on their team in terms of the offense, but they're just so poorly run. I don't really know what to say about the Raiders, but I like Jimmy G. I might be higher on Jimmy G than others, but I think he's just a really good game manager. You put the pieces around him. He obviously has some pretty nice weapons in Vegas with Devontae Adams, with Hunter Renfrow, Josh Jacobs. I like the stuff around him, but he definitely has his limitations, and that's why he's pretty lower down on the list. Coming in at number 20, we have Russell Wilson. This is a guy that I could probably talk about for just a half hour because when he was traded to Denver, I said he was a top 5 player in the NFL. And look at the fall from grace Russell Wilson has had. Just absolutely pitiful last year. I mean, all the Denver Broncos had to do on offense was score 17 points per game, and they would have been a playoff team last year. That's how good their defense was and how putrid their offense was. They just couldn't put up points, and Russell Wilson was a massive reason for that. His arm looked shot. Any throw beyond 10 yards, he looked like he had a noodle arm. He refused to run the ball, which is what made him a playmaker, a superstar in Seattle. So I'm pretty much all out on Russell Wilson. I could even make a case to put him lower down on the list. I guess I'm just kind of respecting his star power at this point because he's still, he has the potential to be good, have a bounce back year, bringing in Sean Payton. I have my issues with Sean Payton I won't get into now, but he's definitely a harder one to rank because I've seen him as high as still in people's top 10, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. There's definitely clear signs of regression from Russell Wilson, having such a pitiful year last year. This is ultimately where I put him, and this is one I really, really, really hope you guys comment on. Out of all the quarterbacks we've talked about thus far, I really want to hear your Russell Wilson takes. At 19, we have Ryan Tannehill. I've never been a big Ryan Tannehill fan. I remember just about a season or 2 ago, people were saying Ryan Tannehill was the most underrated player in the NFL. I always threw cold water on that. I always pushed back from that. To me, I think he was a bit of a stat patter, and I'm not going to get into that now. I can make a video all about Tannehill if you want, but I've just never been his biggest fan. However, I can't argue with his production. He's put up good numbers, and just 2 seasons ago, they were the 1 seed in the AFC. Now, a big reason why they flamed out in the playoffs was because of Tannehill throwing 3 picks. I believe that was against the Bengals. But they've been a perennial playoff team except last year when he was injured ever since he got there. So I give him his credit in terms of winning games, but I'm just not a big fan of his. I think he's extremely limited, and he's benefited greatly from having Derrick Henry, arguably the best running back of this generation, on his team. In at 18, we have Kenny Pickett. I admit my bias up front. I mean, it's literally called the Steel City Sports Podcast. You guys know Steelers are my team. Kenny Pickett is one of my favorite players in the NFL. However, I think that this is very much warranted. Got off to a bit of a slow start, but the last 6 weeks, Kenny Pickett was phenomenal. And the thing that really stands out to me about Kenny Pickett is his poise. He doesn't really seem bothered by if he's having a bad game or if the line isn't holding up. He's still able to really stay locked in. I know he threw a lot of picks, but so did Peyton Manning. Not saying he's Peyton Manning, but a lot of interceptions in your rookie year for me is not really a red flag. I think the O-line is going to be much improved this year, bringing in Broderick Jones at a much-needed position, left tackle. I really like the receiving core, bringing in Allen Robinson for nothing, and George Pickens has the potential to be a superstar in this league. Deontay Johnson's still great. Calvin Austin is a kind of an X factor. So I like a lot about our team this year. I'm probably going to make a long breakdown video for the Steelers before the season starts. I'll definitely do a record prediction video. But you had to know I was going to have some bias towards Kenny. I probably have him higher than other people do, but I really think he's something special, could be really good in this league. Coming in at 17, we have Geno Smith. Absolutely having a breakout year this past season. He was one of the most efficient players in the NFL. Actually, I think he was rated the most efficient quarterback in the NFL. You got to give this guy a ton of credit because, having that bust label on you, he's a perfect example of how we're just so filled with instant gratification. If a guy doesn't come in and produce instantly, he's no good. Well, Geno Smith, he's bounced around the league with the Jets, the Giants, now Seattle, and I'm happy for him. You got to be happy for him. He's really found himself a nice role there in Seattle and leading them to the playoffs this past year. I had Seattle as a bottom 5 team going into last year, just given the fact they traded away Russ, looked like they were going into a rebuild, but like I said, he led them to the playoffs. In the first half of that Niners game, it looked like a close game. I can't remember if it was tied or if Seattle was up by a little, but the first half of that game was really close. He was looking good. Obviously, the second half, the Niners just ripped the Band-Aid off and went pedal to the metal and absolutely obliterated the Seahawks. But Geno had a really good year. He got locked up, I think, for 3 or 4 more years. So really good, stable guy. If you put stuff around him, he can be really good. And that has been it for part 1. We did 32 through 17 today. Probably tomorrow I'll be coming out with 16 through 1. And definitely stay tuned for that. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. I know this is really long, but just wanted to get all my thoughts out. Please leave a like and subscribe.